nobody predicted the internet. Like, this is an insanely different thing in human history that nobody predicted. That's very similar to the advent of the printing press or other huge technological advancements in humanity. As students of history, we know and understand where this is going. There hasn't been a fiat currency throughout human history that has lasted for the lifetime that it was issued for. It always ends in hyperinflation. And it's always because of the way that governments have horrifically mismanaged the currency. And so we're not over here trying to cheer it on. At best, there might be some Bitcoiners that have an accelerationist idea that we need to speed things up to break everything, not because we want the suffering, but because we want the bloom of the new system to actually have its power.
Erik Cason is a leading voice in the Bitcoin community and the author of Crypto Sovereignty. He's worked in the industry since 2013 and is curious about the intersection of philosophy and Bitcoin. Today, Erik explores the profound potential of Bitcoin to revolutionize the global socio-economic landscape, from dissecting the concepts of financial repression and economic colonialism to illuminating Bitcoin's role in promoting sovereignty and liberation. Erik provides valuable insights into the ethical implications of our current financial systems. With a focus on Bitcoin, mining's transformative impact on underserved regions, and its capacity to challenge existing power structures, Erik offers a compelling vision for a more equitable, globalized future. Before we get on with the video, we'd like to introduce our sponsors who have made this series possible: Stampseed, the Orange Pill app, and Swan. It's our mission to provide our audience with a safe, reliable, and robust way to buy, store, and learn about Bitcoin. Our partners are businesses and people we respect, and are products that we at Bit Intelligence personally use. You're watching 21 Voices. Without further ado, here is Erik Cason in Sydney, Australia. He's talking about the CFA franc, which is a currency used to enact French monetary imperialism in Africa.
The financial repression very much is the secondary capacity to imperialism, which the French control the currency of these 14 countries because they imperialistically owned them as a people before. And the only reason why they left was because they were able to create this sort of financial imperialism that these people now suffer under. Without control of their own currency, they're always at the behests of needing to pay the French first and foremost, which they do at their own suffering. So most of these countries and people have never even had the opportunity to ever create any meaningful kind of economic development because any wealth that they do save is stolen by the West from them. And Alex Gladstein's most recent book that covers the repression that the IMF and the World Bank do under the guise of sponsoring countries and helping them restructure their debt is anything but. He was able to trace the capital flows of that about $83 billion have flown from the global south, the world's poorest countries, into the global north, the world's richest countries. What could have those people done with $83 billion in capital investment in their own country that was actually for them and for themselves? And because they don't have any ability to invest in themselves now, they turn to people like the Chinese to come invest in mega projects that won't be profitable for them because the Chinese will own it directly and will use that to exploit their resources into the coming century. And so one of the things that I think is the most hopeful aspect of Bitcoin, and I've had incredible conversations with people that are doing mining operations out there, is that this is the first real opportunity that these people have had for development in a meaningful way, with not only them getting electricity for the first time, but once they understand Bitcoin, they have the ability to hold a self-sovereign currency. And pretty much all countries in Africa suffer endemic inflation, where most people are losing upwards of 50% of their wealth per year towards inflation. Could you imagine having half of your purchasing power stolen from you every single year just because you live in a particular nation state? That not only seems horrifically unfair, but when we actually look at our own relationship to it and how the full global financial system operates in tandem with it to create this sort of financial imperialism, it's very important to trace these relationships and understand that we as Americans directly finance that sort of financial repression that happens in other places. Bitcoin is an ethical question about what can we do to actually help these people in a meaningful way. And I don't think it's charity. It's to teach a man to fish as opposed to give him fish. And so like if you're holding something that is going to lose 50% of its purchasing power over time, like that doesn't help somebody, including even if you're giving them financial sponsorship. By allowing for individuals to actually hold their wealth in a self-sovereign way that allows for them not only to invest in themselves, their education, their future, and their community, there becomes a much more powerful mode to create economic incentives where people are going to create robust circular economies. They're going to invest in themselves and the infrastructure in their own country because they finally know that their own wealth isn't going to be stolen from them or inflated away. And it's really important to understand that these people, even if they can get dollars, a lot of times banking access is so difficult that even when they can get dollars to go transfer them into different currencies or send them abroad, they're facing massive fees that with both Bitcoin and the Lightning Network, there's a really meaningful way now for them to actually be able to, say, engage in remittances where they can send money home back to the home country without needing to lose 5% of it to a bank transfer fee. If you just look at the actual books of how finance and interest operates, there's no conceivable way that this money can ever be paid back. There's just far too much leverage debt into the system, and inflation is too high, interest rates are too high, and so the whole system has to blow out at some point in time. In addition to people that are trying to say that the 21st century is more peacefully, like there's actually more conflicts going on globally than almost ever before. And places like Ukraine, there's a very real danger of conflict spinning out in a much larger way that none of us have control over. And if you've ever read stories about people that had to flee from their homes because of war, it's not something that was really anticipated or predicted in any meaningful way. And to me, that's one of the great hopes that Bitcoin offers, is that just as a safety valve across the board, whether that's your government decides that you're a dissident and you should no longer have banking access, or if there's a giant fire in your home and you have to get out immediately, if you can actually have your private keys on you in a meaningful way, you can get out with some of your wealth intact. And that's a very important and powerful thing, particularly for the world's most oppressed people. And so part of what I see happening in the future is because of the way that we're seeing this horrendous bubble of inflation that's going to continue to grow and grow until it becomes endemic and goes into hyperinflation. I very strongly believe that we can already see the dialogue that's going on from central banks that they want to issue their own digital currency. And it's very clear to me that these digital currencies are nothing other than gigantic surveillance panopticons that are designed to surveil everyone, everywhere, at all times, for all financial transactions, to make sure that they're always within the purview of the government. So when you just look at what governments in, say, like Holland are doing towards their farmers by trying to meet their environmental governmental standards, which are these horrific projects that are so illogically and poorly thought out, that we have countries like Holland, they're destroying the livelihood of their very people, who are the farmers that provide for the sustenance and livelihood of their people. They're destroying it under this idea that that's somehow saving the environment. If saving the environment means destroying our own farms, that's a kind of insanity that we actually need to look directly in the face and go, these people aren't going to leave us alone or let us have peace. And that's one of the great problems with this idea of what the climate crisis is. And it's not to say that it isn't happening, but are these actually the thoughtful and addressable solutions? Because there's very real environmental crisis going on with deforestation, pollution, ocean dumping, and other things. But the way we've been distracted with trying to control the weather in order to, frankly, ignore these other very real problems is part of the distraction to me. And I think that is very dangerous, that these same entities that have created the crisis that we find within, that we want solutions from them. And part of their solutions, they're so half-baked and brain dead that people are like, well, everybody can get onto an EV. And then we suddenly have solved the problem of people driving cars with no thought at all about the amount of lithium and how that gets mined with gigantic tractor machines and the kind of environmental degradation that comes from that. Not to mention, meanwhile, because we're trying to control the weather through these global environmental government standards, we don't address the problem that the largest polluter in the world is the United States military. To me, these are the very real illogical things that when you present to people, they usually don't have a good solution other than stuttering towards it. And again, that's why I feel very strongly we can't look towards our governments to try to solve these problems for us, because they created them in the first place by their horrific mismanagement of money. And so rather than continually giving them money, sponsoring them, allowing for our own economic productivity to be stolen by them, I think that people would be much more well invested to actually put a little bit of money into Bitcoin, continue to save in that medium, really try to understand it and how it protects them in a meaningful way. Because I think as they go down the rabbit hole to ask all of those questions, you suddenly start connecting all the dots about everything that we've been talking here. And you understand that by you holding Bitcoin, it's not just about number going up and you being able to secure your own wealth, but allows for you to have a very real solidarity with people in a place like Africa that have been suffering under the tremendous amount of inflation and financial imperialism that they've been suffering for decades. And now there's a way to have a very real solidarity in a way that I think is very meaningful for people, that a lot of people want to change. They just don't understand the connection or relationship between those things.
Please bear with us for a quick message from our sponsors. These videos take a lot of time to shoot and edit, and we've partnered with brands we trust like Stamp Seed and the Orange Pill app in order to get the funding we need to bring you these videos every week. Don't store your Bitcoin in cold storage without stamping your seed phrase on an indestructible titanium plate. Stamp Seed is fireproof, rust-proof, impact-proof, and easy to hide. It has no loose parts and will give you ultimate peace of mind that your Bitcoin is safe and sound for the long term. Click the link in the description below for 15% off your stamping kit. When I finally got Bitcoin, it hit me like a lightning bolt. This was the currency of the future, the only money that truly mattered. But there was a problem. I was a lone hodler in a sea of skeptics. That is, until I discovered the Orange Pill app. Suddenly, I was connected with a network of like-minded Bitcoin enthusiasts right in my own city. The Orange Pill app is more than just a social network. It's a community of passionate individuals determined to change the world, one Satoshi at a time. This series is brought to you by Swan and created by Bit Intelligence. Remember to like this video and subscribe to both our channels for more videos like this every week.
I think 100 years from now, it'll almost seem absurd to our great-grandchildren that we tolerated a kind of financial system that allowed for money to be printed out for whatever purpose the people elected into power had manipulated and contorted in order to serve their own agenda. The fact that we have been sending hundreds of millions of dollars to a war in Ukraine, billions to Ukraine that has never been approved by the American public in a meaningful way, and that there is clear opinions against at this point in time, is despicable. And I very much hope that the future that we go into, there won't be the same capacity or ability to be able to finance wars like that, because people will have the power of the purse in their hands once again. Governments will not be able to willy-nilly print out capital because it'll always hyperinflate to nothing almost instantly, because people will know what it means for a government currency that can be printed out only supported by their own debt. And I think that goes to show the real power of Bitcoin too. Our democracy has been thoroughly destroyed by these corporate and political interests and gerrymandering in such a way to make for the political apparatus of democracy meaningless. Whereas with Bitcoin, the true democratic capacity of what your economic power matters once again. And again, this no longer becomes a democratic movement just for Americans, it becomes a democratic movement globally. So that my one Bitcoin is worth the same one Bitcoin as somebody else across the globe, and the political rights that Bitcoin impels to me through cryptography is granted to the same people who hold it anywhere in the world. Whether that's a dissident Uyghur who's no longer allowed to be in his home country because of the things that he has said, or whether it's somebody that's struggling in conflicts in Africa trying to help their own people and is upset a dictator. They cannot steal their Bitcoin if it's being held in a thoughtful, robust, self-sovereign way. And that becomes the most important democratic vehicle of the 21st century, is by us choosing to collectivize our economic wealth together against whatever fiat government might be seeking to steal that economic wealth from us. As students of history, we know and understand where this is going. There hasn't been a fiat currency throughout human history that has lasted for the lifetime that it was issued for. It always ends in hyperinflation. And it's always because of the way that governments have horrifically mismanaged the currency. And so we're not over here trying to cheer it on. At best, there might be some Bitcoiners that have an accelerationist idea of that we need to speed things up to break everything, not because we want the suffering, but because we want the bloom of the new system to actually have its power. And the unfortunate fact is that the suffering really teaches a lesson. And it's that it turns out if you had bought bonds back in the 1990s and you held it through to the entire time to its duration, in 2020, those bonds didn't actualize the value that you expected them to. These things that we've been told are actual savings vehicles that are supposed to protect us don't do that at all. And that's a very scary thing to admit, but it's also a powerful thing to be able to possess and say, you know what, this is true, and maybe I need to look to new and different solutions that could help us. And one of the great hopes that I have is we can actually possess the capacity of this technology to create a new economic and financial system. I believe on the back end of that actually becomes a new form of political system, very much in the same way that the American revolutionaries introduced the idea of a republic to the world, when we had never seen anything like that in human history before, and it seemed like such a radical idea in 1750. Yet somehow by 1850, the majority of governments in the world had became republics, this totally new form of representative government that legitimately gave people new political rights that they had never had before. And I think we can get something very similar to that in terms of new political rights through Bitcoin and the internet and this new sort of global collective movement that we're all involved in.
Bitcoin's potential to reshape our world extends far beyond financial markets. Erik's deep dive into the intersection of Bitcoin history and philosophy offers a refreshing perspective on the transformative power of this singular digital currency. By challenging traditional notions of money and sovereignty, Erik inspires us to rethink our relationship with finance and society at large. Stay tuned for more enlightening discussions, and remember to subscribe for the latest recaps, insights, and films about all things Bitcoin.
What's up, everyone? My name's Bevan, and I'm the creator of the Bit Intelligence YouTube channel. We partnered with Swan for this original series so that we could reach the largest audience possible. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to both of our channels below so that you don't miss a single episode.
This is 21 Voices. If you want to watch another episode, try this one here. We'll see you next time.